All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Simply Finance with Shane White. I am pumped today to have David Lester, one of the co-founders of Olipop, on the podcast. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
I appreciate you taking the time. First of all, would you mind giving everyone just a little intro to you and to the brand?
Yeah, sure. So Olipop is a new kind of soda. It is all the things that you know and love about soda. It's delicious, it's refreshing, nostalgic, but with one fundamental difference in that we have changed the nutritional panels. So instead of 40 grams of sugar, there is 2 to 5 grams of sugar and 9 grams of dietary fiber. And my co-founder Ben has spent years now developing a pretty sophisticated solution for digestive health that includes prebiotics, botanicals, plant fiber, and we take that super seriously, and we have completed our own scientific studies with Baylor and Purdue medical colleges to make sure that what we're saying the product does is actually supporting people in that way. And my background, Ben and I have been working together now for 10 years. This is our second venture together. And prior to that, I had a corporate career working at spirits company called Diageo for 10 years, which took me to various places around the world, working in kind of brand marketing and innovation.
Awesome. Yeah, I was gonna say I was looking at you on LinkedIn. And I'm like, you have quite the background in this space in general. Do you remember, or could you maybe even go back? So, one of the things before we started recording, I was saying is on this podcast, love going from 0 to 1, understanding kind of the beginning and how you guys came up with it. So I know your background, you both have been in like the prebiotic, better for you health space. Would you mind giving everyone maybe a little bit more of a background into just how you and Ben met? And then really, I'll get into another question, but curious on just like where the idea came from for Olipop.
Yeah, I mean, Ben is really patient zero for this. Super interesting guy, very entrepreneurial person. He in his teenage years was overweight. He was eating the standard American diet and kind of recognized that his life was not going down a path that was going to be very beneficial for him. So at that point, he decided to get a part-time job. He started buying better food for himself. He lost weight, but he also saw real cognitive benefits from changing his diet. His mental clarity improved. And he became really interested in the gut-brain connection, so much so that he dropped out of college and started to teach himself microbiology. So super autodidactic. He then went on an entrepreneurial journey, starting one of the first kombucha companies, selling high nutritional supplements online for a while. He was signed to an electronic music label for a period.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then when I met him, he was working on this kind of water kefir based soda product that he had, just kind of worked to stabilize the water kefir. And really in very kind of simple terms, he was really passionate about taking the benefits of digestive health to a broader audience. He grew up in the kind of Santa Cruz area and had seen how passionate people were about kombucha, but also understood that for every one person that liked it, there were 10 that didn't.
Yeah.
And just simply thought, what is a big category? Well, soda's big. What if I made this taste like a soda? Then more people would drink it.
Oh,
So, I had decided at that point to quit my job at Diageo after 10 years. And when I told my boss, she said, look, if your mind's made up on that, you may want to speak to this guy. He's looking for a business partner. And that turned out to be Ben. And we met at a cafe in Palo Alto. He had, a little bag of sodas that he had, made in a soda stream and decanted into glass bottles. And
oh,
I
wow.
tried them, and yeah, they tasted amazing. And he told me like the sugar content and that he was using stevia. And I was pretty blown away. He'd managed to make them taste so good. They tasted like a full calorie soda to me. I didn't know anything about gut health at the time, but I came away from that conversation thoroughly inspired. And got home to my wife and, just recently married, about to have kids, and saw this look of fear in her eyes. She said, "You're going to do this thing with this guy, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I'm going to do it." It took a year, no salary. Ben and I just kind of got that thing off the ground. And, that's kind of how we set out on our journey.
Wow. No, that's wild. I did not know that. So what was the thought process? A lot of people listen to this, I think, are in that world of either like getting started with something, have a at least like an itch to maybe go do something on their own. For you, what was that conversation with your wife? And then ultimately, like from your perspective on leaving Diageo without the next thing lined up, like what was your kind of thought process through that part of your journey?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, for context, at the time I was 31, I think, about 31. So yeah, I think it's important, like where you are at in your career. And, I really enjoyed my time at Diageo. I thought it was a great company. But I was kind of getting frustrated with the bureaucracy of a large business.
Sure.
And I just didn't feel like I had meaning in what I was doing. I grew up in a pretty working class area in the northwest of England, and my mom was a school teacher. My dad worked for the local council, and I saw them having really material impact on people's lives. And it was fun. The job I had. I mean, it took me from London, Sydney to Sao Paulo. To work in those different cities, but I just wanted to find some more meaning in what I was doing. And so I don't think I really knew what I wanted to do more than I knew what I didn't want to do. And, there's probably a large part of naivety in that. Looking back, I really had no idea what I was doing. I think you've got to need to do it in a way if you get, because, particularly if you got a good corporate job, there's a lot of benefits to that. I mean, it was a great place to work, great structure. Candidly, a lot of startups are not very good places to work. I think you've really got to need to do it. And, there's certainly times, I was looking back where I was like, give me my beanbag and, cookies and, whatever, ideation break room treats and stuff. You just kind of like push through and I'd say venture number one, which was 3 years, super stressful, not very fun at all. We then had 2 years in between, which was kind of self-reflection, personal growth, reformulation, thinking through the idea, and then another whatever year or so, just kind of like dragging something into existence again. And it was only at that point, really, I'd say I could honestly say I started to enjoy the experience. It's not a kind of decision to be taken lightly. If it's your first venture, you're really not going to be able to understand what it's like. You just got to want to dive in and be ready to kind of loosen your screws and, learn some stuff and, be open to that at whatever point in your life you're in.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You kind of just dove in and you figured it out. That makes a ton of sense. So when you kind of hit on it, but the other venture you're talking about, is that OBO prebiotic soda? So is that like the pre Olipop venture you guys were working on together?
Exactly. Yeah, it really was like a version 1.0. We messed up financing. We messed up, there was improvements to make on the concept. I think it's very challenging to, there's so much to learn being founding a business, starting a business. And I'm really in awe of people that do it for the first time and make a success out of it, because in my mind, there's almost just too much stuff to learn in one go. Like you can't absorb that much information. You're going to make mistakes, and then those mistakes start to compound over time, and then you find yourself in a real pickle. So, I think it's no surprise that like venture 2 or 3 is often the one that kind of really, really clicks for people.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes sense a ton. What was it like, shutting down the first one, learning your lessons? Because I think it's interesting to hear that, right? Especially for people listening. you could have just gone back to corporate America, I guess, right? If you wanted to, like, you could have been like, okay, I tried, it didn't really work out, but you decided to like double down and go forward. Do you remember kind of your thought process through that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely considered it, going back to corporate life. I mean, I was exhausted. I think the last 8 months or so of that venture, I was probably pretty depressed. That, I had, it was quite a challenging point in life where we had two young kids as well, bringing up. Um, so yeah, it was definitely a strong consideration. But I think there was a number of factors for me. I kind of considered going back to that job and realized that I really couldn't get motivated to do it again. Particularly as I got a bit of rest and, sort of got my energy and back and things. Ben and I were really passionate about the mission that we were going after. Like, it felt good to be pursuing that. And so, you kind of start to contextualize that this is just part of the journey. It's not the end of it. It's like, this was, turned out to be a kind of like necessary step, in the process, to get to where we are now. And so yeah, and then, kind of proving to myself that I could do it. I think I felt like there was, I'd done myself a disservice the first time around, and I can do better than that. And so, I was like, okay, let's go and prove that you can.
Yeah, no, that makes sense too. So when you decide to go forward, you're gonna like rebrand, bring this next venture to life. You guys were tweaking the product behind the scenes. Do you remember then what was it like going 0 to 1 with that venture? So like I'm sure like going through a rebrand and reformulating and bringing another product to market. What was it like kind of the second time coming to life with a product?
Yeah, we essentially just started from scratch. We start everything from the product and from the kind of human need, if you like. So,
Okay.
it's one of the reasons I love working with Ben, is because, I mean, this is a guy that wakes up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night wondering about what's the meaning of life, So,
Okay. Yeah.
he's a very driven person and thinks very deeply and purposely about how he is spending his time and what he's doing in life. And I really respect that. And so, as we looked at it, we were like, okay, well, our goal is still the same. Like, we need to make a fundamental dent in, people's digestive health and nutrition. And what was interesting is a number of the connections that we had, from our OB days, leading nutritionists, microbiologists, were really switching their focus from probiotics to prebiotics and fiber as a way of modulating for optimal digestive health. So, people like Justin Sonnenberg out Stanford, studying hunter-gatherer tribes,
Mm.
Some of which still exist today in parts of Asia and Africa, consuming a diet that we typically would have consumed for hundreds of thousands of years. And, studies were really interesting, and they revealed kind of two major differences in the diet. One, the quantity of fiber that hunter-gatherer consumes, around 200 grams a day versus our 15 on average in the West. And nutrient diversity. A hunter-gatherer would consume about 1,400 different types of food in a year. We get 200 if we're lucky. And,
Oh, wow.
intuitively, that makes sense. We've got this heavily hybridized food system, consumer packaged goods that are made from, primarily 4 ingredients with a bunch of flavoring, So, yeah, that kind of started us off on that path. Ben actually went to Japan for a while to kind of think about things and study, a little further. All the while I'm kind of looking at the market and seeing, how we would wrap this thing and bring it to life, and how we would sort of, say we tested, we experienced some success first time around with the product. It wasn't like a total failure. The product itself was pretty successful in the market. It was just kind of the infrastructure around it. So, yeah, Ben then started formulating, and I actually ended up running, I think, like 20 consumer groups myself, just
Oh, wow.
throughout California, just friendship groups, whatever we could scrap together through friends of friends. Super insightful. Actually, those research groups led us to, completely redesign our packaging a month or so before launch. Just because we felt like the or we could see the original pack design that we had, that we'd raised our seed convertible note of, wasn't working the way that we wanted it to. And from there, it's just kind of like test and learn. We go into 40 stores in Northern California, and then Erewhon wants to pick us up, and so we start putting some volume through Erewhon, and then Whole Foods takes notice in Northern California, and just kind of things built from there.
Got it. Well, hey, those are some good retailers to get some attention from early on. That's awesome. Yeah, no, that's really cool. And I think it's interesting to hear that you guys were still, I guess for lack of better words, you were patient and you were trying to come to market with like a true need. And for everyone listening, I think the one thing I probably skipped over was, would you mind? So explain to everyone, it's a prebiotic, probiotic, low sugar. It's really a soda, right? I mean, do you guys sell it, or I guess market it as a soda, or what do you guys market it as to consumers?
Yeah, we market it as a new kind of soda because the people have a perception of soda right now, which is it's cheap and sugary and a cheap sugary fizzy drink. And so we're kind of redefining people's expectations of it, say, look, it's a lot of the things that you imagine, which is delicious, nostalgic, refreshing, fun, but instead of harming your health, this is actually going to support it. And so that's a major shift, and I think sort of one of the lessons from my Diageo days was around, only breaking one rule, but break it really hard.
Yeah. Okay.
And, keep everything else the same, because consumer behavior change is hard, right? If you throw something in front of people that's very unfamiliar to them, it is very difficult to get them to shift behavior. And there's some super disruptive innovation that have completely redefined a category, or but often it's quite a disruptive thing just to change one thing and keep everything else the same. And so, as you can imagine, for people, the idea that a soda can now support your digestive health, that's pretty disruptive idea.
Yeah.
If you start changing other things as well, then they're like, hold on, this really is too wacky now. But we're like, everything else is the same. Don't worry about it. It comes in a can. It's cola flavor. It tastes delicious. It's fizzy. Everything else is the same. The only thing you've got to get your head around is that this now supports your health. So yeah, I think that's kind of key aspect to the design of the concept.
Yeah, no, it's been cool because as I was doing my own research, like obviously like this is a LaCroix, if everyone's watching, I feel like that space has become so crowded with so many brands that are trying to do, for lack of better words, again, like a copycat of what a LaCroix is. When I was realizing you guys are doing like actual like Coke flavor, like soda pop flavors, I'm like, oh, that's ingenious, because that really is like probably the biggest missing piece in my mind in that category. It's like a better for you version of that, which you guys are obviously hitting right on the head. So that's exciting. And I've even seen some pictures too. I think you guys shared some on social where it's like, Pepsi or Coke, and you guys are right below them in some sets in retail, which I thought that's got to be great placement for you guys. It's like an aha moment for consumers, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, typically we're ranged in the kombucha section, and what we're now reframing as digestive health, because that's what it's changing
Yeah.
to. So as kombucha kind of, and to your earlier point around sparkling water as well, soda is like a $40 billion category. Sparkling water is about 4 billion, and kombucha is about 1 billion. So the opportunity is huge in soda, and really, we look at Olipop as kind of a Trojan horse style product. You just, switch out the kind of poison for the antidote, essentially.
Yeah.
But, everything else stays the same. Very nefarious category, soda, but ubiquitous nonetheless. And, 97% household penetration or something. So if you're looking for market opportunity, if you're looking for addressable market, soda is one of the best categories to be in, provided you can successfully execute against the idea of a soda replacement, which, is a lot easier said than done. I don't think the idea of, a better for you soda is necessarily that groundbreaking, but, it's how you execute it. Are you able to formulate that? Ben does all the formulation for our products, hundreds of experimentation,
Oh, wow.
hours of experimentation on each formula that we launch. So that's critical, because if the taste doesn't back up the promise, then, we wouldn't be where we are now.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And I love asking this question to founders, because I think it's really interesting kind of to build on like where you guys sit and who you're competing against in that massive category. Is why do you think, the other big soda brands haven't tried to come out with something, at least in the healthier, better for you soda space, as you see some of these other big time food and beverage brands starting to copycat, you know, better for you products in their aisles, for example?
Yeah, I think they have to a degree. You've seen them coming out with, stevia sweetened Coke and, other products. I mean, having sat on both sides of the fence, having worked for a, large, multi-billion dollar multinational company, and Diageo is pretty good at innovation as well. Actually, I think it's one of the better ones. But those businesses are not set up for innovation, and they shouldn't be, because if you kind of save a cent on the cost of a can of Coke, you're a hero in that business. It's
Sure. Yeah.
changing. And so you really need to be thinking about how you manage large organizational structure, how you deliver, incremental gains that have, a compounding effect over time. The startup mindset is completely different. It's around, failing and learning from it, growth mindset, trying things, less structured environment. So they're just fundamentally at odds. And I think, it's an unrealistic expectation to, for large businesses to be able to really disrupt markets and disrupt themselves, particularly, a business like Coke. Coca-Cola is such a big part of what they do, and their revenue, a little different to Pepsi, but so it's, anything you stick in that system is going to be tiny in comparison. Even at Diageo, the focus brands, you're looking at kind of Johnny Walker, Smirnoff, Guinness, and then everything else follows a distant second after that.
Sure.
I worked on some big brands, like I worked on Gordon's Gin, the biggest gin brand in the world, but you struggle to get focus within that portfolio just because it's not, it's not shifting the dial in the same way that, selling 1% more Johnny Walker is going to do or something. So, I think, there's a place for both in the market. I don't think many of the people working in our business now would be very good at in a $1 billion company, myself included. It's just sort of different stages of the life cycle.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I would have to agree from the stories I've heard that makes a ton of sense. It's like moving a big ship around. It's a lot different in those big organizations. For you guys, so when you came to market with Olipop, the one consistent thing I've heard from other beverage founders on my podcast is the like upfront costs that it takes to bring a canned good to market. It's been kind of an interesting theme that I didn't really know a lot about until I met some founders. What was that like for you guys? Like, you're doing all this research and R&D, and then to bring a canned good to market, it just seems like most brands, if you want to get into that space, you really have to either have a lot of bootstrap funding or really go raise capital pretty early. Was that something you guys dealt with as well, just trying to scale that part of the business and, buy inventory?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want to gaslight people in that you can kind of bootstrap your way to, success in beverage. It's, Ben and I, didn't really have any contacts. I'm from the UK originally. I didn't have much of a network over here. Ben obviously dropped out of college, so didn't have the MBA contacts or anything like that. We don't have family wealth or anything. So, if you're in that position, it does take a bit of cash. And we started with a $500,000 convertible note, which was raised off. You have to get through a bit of the, R&D and stuff yourselves. Sure. So we had to kind of invest in ingredients, and, we had to invest in packaging and stuff. So that we just kind of like dipped into our own pockets, pretty like nerve wracking experience, particularly when thing could just like zero out on you within months. But, I think you've got to, seeing is believing, and you've got to be able to present something to investors that they can kind of get their heads around a little bit. And then I would say raise some cash. And if you can, raise even more than that, because, yeah, by the time you buy all your inventory, you screw up a production run, it's, you do need some cash. And, it depends on the business. Like some just, aren't really suited for venture capital style funding. It may be something that, yeah, you know, do buy glass bottles and just, make them yourself in your
Yeah.
kitchen and deliver them to 5 local stores or something. But, we felt strongly enough that there was a big enough opportunity that we didn't need to go through that level of testing. We just wanted to kind of swing for the fence a little quicker. So we went straight to the market to get some cash.
And that makes sense. Totally makes sense. I feel like it's almost inevitable. What was like a big learning lesson for you guys, especially hearing that you guys didn't have like experience in raising capital or have maybe this like wild network where it was an easy tap into? What was that process like for you guys, and any learning lessons that you could give to the audience? I'm sure people would love to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, very hard. We were on our second venture as well. So that helps because, investors are naturally skeptical of entrepreneurs because, most times you don't know what you're getting into and you start to get in. Investors have seen lots of these journeys, right? Most of the investments they make don't work out, particularly if they're a seed stage investors. So, they look at you, you're a 31-year-old, 27-year-old, 35-year-old, whatever, and or even 45-year-old coming out of the corporate environment, and they're like, you don't know what you're about to get into.
Ah,
And you can you handle it, and are you going to want to push through when things are really challenging? So seeing that we had got whacked around the head for 3 years and we're back again, investors were like, okay, clearly these guys do have some appetite for this thing. They're not going to just tap out through, they're not naive anymore. There's some battle scars there. So, that is certainly useful. I think that first check you raise is the hardest you will ever raise. And there's nothing rational about it. So, I was chatting to an entrepreneur earlier today and giving him some advice around this as well. But, I mean, this is just sort of my opinion. So, and it could be wrong, like all of my opinions, but I'll say it nonetheless. The sort of textbook way of raising seed financing of like put your business plan together, and like your business plan is pretty BS at that point
sure.
because you could put together a 5-year plan that shows you're going to get to like $100 million, but you haven't even made a bottle of the stuff yet. So
True.
I mean, you can theoretically put in there whatever number you want, and any investor who's savvy enough will realize that it's just entirely made up numbers. And so all you're demonstrating is like, how good are you at putting together a fictional P&L,
Yeah.
which only has so much value when the rubber hits the road. So I think often you need to do some honest kind of introspection around like, does this product need to exist, and does it serve humanity in some way? Like, does it serve a purpose? I think it's dangerous just to kind of be chasing trends, but it can work out if you're in a market that there's sort of plenty of competitors come into our space that have been quite successful. If you find a kind of concept that's working properly. But I think the entrepreneurs I really admire are the ones that look at like what human problems need to be solved, and they just feel
Yeah.
very passionate about that. And so it helps you on the pivot as well, because you might find that the problem you're trying to solve for, you think it's a beverage, but it actually turns out to be an app. And you kind of learn that as you go through it. So if you're kind of focused on something like we were just like, look, we think this is really important to change the way people's nutrition and their digestive health. So we're gonna just keep going at this. Like, it's gonna, when we get knocked down, we'll kind of get back up again, because we're sort of pursuing a broader aim. And I think investors pick up on that stuff as well, and if you do clearly believe in what you're doing, you have a healthy skepticism and realism about the difficulty and the challenges ahead. And I think if you have some kind of outsized competitive advantage, so whatever that might be, and I think often it depends on the entrepreneurial team. In our case, Ben is a very skilled formulator, and I had done 10 years prior at a major multinational in marketing. So, investors are going to think, well, the product's probably going to taste pretty good, or it can taste it is, and that's kind of credible why that is competitive advantage. And then, this other guy is probably going to be able to convince people to, wrap it in a way that convinces people to buy into it. And so you just need something, whether it's finance or, lean in. I see entrepreneurs getting stuck on trying to be good at everything. And you really don't need to be. You need to be like, I'd call it like a C+ or D sometimes, a lot of things, like basically just not literally going off the rails, and then be a star at just one thing. Like you might have a real skill for TikTok. And so when investors looking at it and it's like, why this one and not the other one? Well, these guys have an ability to, and an understanding of TikTok that is going to allow them to kind of scale this thing in a way that others wouldn't be able to. So, I think it is very hard, that first check. And I think, you can help yourself with a lot of introspection and, being authentic with investors as well. And, you will attract the best investors if you approach it in that way.
That is some great advice. I think some advice that we've not gotten on here before. So thanks for that. That's fantastic. So you guys, you go through the raise, you're raising money in the background. You're trying to get this off the ground. What were some of the like early distribution points that you guys were able to get early on?
Well, first was just, 40 stores in Northern California. We managed to convince the distributor to distribute us in Northern California. And so, that was it. It's hard, that as well, because chicken and egg, the distributors like, I don't know, I'm not sure I want to take a gamble on these guys. They haven't got any stores yet. So, it's hard. And then, sales hire is kind of critical at that point to ensure that if you get 40 stores or 10 stores or 5 stores, like you better make sure that they work.
Sure.
Because, your success will be dictated by the velocity in the stores that you're in, and everything gets extrapolated from there. So if you're selling, I don't know, 100 units a week per store in 40 stores in Northern California, that's going to get people excited because they're going to extrapolate that number and think maybe they could sell 100 units or even 50 units in like 5,000 stores. And that's interesting. If you're doing 2 units a week and you're saying, well, it's because we don't have sampling and this and that, and there's, a bunch of reasons why it's not working. It's probably not going to fly because, part of often what investors are looking for as well, what retailers are looking for is like, can you make it happen even under difficult circumstances? You just have to find a way. It's kind of a bruising experience, starts in that way. There's no excuses. Like you can have excuses, but it's not very useful to you. Just the net outcome is your business, it dies.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's really good advice too, to not just like sit back and make excuses on early velocity. Was that something you guys had pretty good success with out the gate at these locations?
We did, yeah. I think it's a case for a lot of, like, your product should work without you having to really sweat it. You should have to execute it properly in store, but if it's got a real reason to exist, then people should see that and be picking it up and come back and repeat. For us at the time, say there's a number of sort of competitors enter the market now, but there really was nothing like our product out there, like literally nothing people get their hands on. So, for probably about 12 months, we had the run of the market where, people were just kind of gravitating towards, Olipop because it was serving a real need for them. They wanted to drink soda or had given up, gone into sparkling water or whatever, but we're looking for something full flavored. And, this allowed them the opportunity to do that.
No, yeah, I love that. And what, in today's world, like coming out, hopefully the other side of COVID, for you guys, I'm sure it's a little more difficult because you sell obviously a beverage that's a heavier product. What has, like D2C and e-commerce, just in general, Amazon, what have those platforms been big pushes for you guys?
Yeah, they've been transformational. It's interesting now with, you know, Imperfect Produce, GoPuff, Amazon, your own D2C platform, Target.com, Walmart.com, I think, you know, modern consumer goods businesses really have to think about omnichannel in a way that we haven't in the past. That's definitely changed in the last 18 months. We went from, D2C is like 5% of our revenue to something like 30%.
Oh, wow.
And we grew by 1000% as a business during the pandemic. So,
Wow. Good for you
you
guys.
can,
Congrats.
yeah, thanks. And so you can kind of get an idea of like how fast the growth in D2C would have been. It's a lot of work, and we chose to build our own platform before going to Amazon,
Okay.
which I think is a critical thing to do, both from a profit perspective and from, you control the data and things, but it is
Yeah.
materially more difficult to do that. And so, required a lot of effort, and it just takes time. Like, you can't build that stuff quickly. You just have to we're on another phase now of like, it's almost like levels of a video game,
Yeah.
you just sort of get to level 5, and then you're like, okay, what's next in the D2C game to get to level 6? And upscale in certain areas.
Are you guys how is things, I guess, for lack of better words, transition from D2C to Amazon more so through the pandemic, or has D2C been able to grow with it? I know that's something in my time at RX that, like, when I came in, Amazon was there. We were like not really focused on it. It was kind of growing organically, and our D2C was like our focus for ecom. And then, like, over my time there, it's like transition in ecom, or Amazon specifically is just taken off as just, one of the biggest customers we have.
Yeah, I'd say everything is growing, honestly. We're in a kind of hyper growth phase. We're less than 3 years old as a business. So,
Sure.
it's just how you accelerate everything, really.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes total sense. Obviously you've already mentioned lots of challenges, but has there been any of like the big key challenges for you guys in Olipop that was a surprise to you, that like something maybe you just like didn't see coming, that people listening would think would be a like an aha moment for you guys?
I mean, after our first experience on Obi, it would be hard to throw anything at me that I would then be surprised by, to be honest.
Okay.
So, and that does help, like having crashed through pretty much every hedge there is to crash through. It helps you see around the corners a little bit more. So I'd say what's kind of reassuring for entrepreneurs out there, I would say, look, if you're having an awesome time and growing your business, then good on you. And that's amazing. And if you're not, and it's super painful and you feel like you're making a mistake at every turn, then that's okay as well. Because, if you are committed to the entrepreneurial path, if you're clear on a mission, then you'll be back and you'll be more experienced, and the mistakes you made will, turn into learning, and, you're unlikely to make them again if you, have the kind of humility and introspection to lean into a true growth mindset. So, I don't know. I mean, there's, all kinds of stuff. There's challenges with co-packers, your funding might drop through at the last minute, like never count that until it's in the bank. I think it's just having a malleable mindset where, you're kind of prepared for anything, but also, there's kind of, you get a degree of comfort. I think first time around, I was just stressed the whole time. I was like, oh my God, this thing has gone wrong. This other thing's gone wrong. This other thing could go wrong. And it's all true. It could happen, and, stuff is going wrong. But, equally, once you, build a team, or if it's just you, if you build your own mindset where, you can kind of adapt and learn quickly, you learn to kind of ride out the bumps a little bit, and know the risk going in, that like you might just get caught out. There's an element of luck that, in this as well. A hire that just kind of comes across your desk that you make and turns out to be amazing, or just a chance meeting with a retailer that gets you in, and, and you might get boxed in, and you might get, but that's where I think it's really important to appreciate and enjoy the entrepreneurial journey. Again, something I did not do the first time around. It was not fun. I wasn't kind of learning. I learned after I left that venture and did the self-reflection. This time around, I'm like, yeah, this is crazy. And that's why I like it, because, you know, every week something gets thrown at me and then I have to sit with it and think through and adapt. And maybe it challenges me to grow as an individual. And so I have to do that. And that's my job for the week, to kind of go through some personal growth. And, you know, then if your business zeroes out, you're like, well, yeah, I mean, it happens
Yeah.
more frequently than not in startups. So your expectation should probably be that your business is going to zero out. And it's like, you know, a pleasant surprise if it doesn't. But what you do have is this incredible life experience that, you know, you simply cannot get in a corporate environment or, you know, other jobs. And, you know, so once you commit to that, you know, you're in it. You know, it's like having kids or something. You know, you can't really know until you have a kid, and one day it's just
Sure.
there. You're like, now you're a parent, you know, and you're like, oh, okay. Better figure this out. You know, you've read the manuals and stuff, but, you know, as I say, the thing in practice is very different, and then you just enter on a journey of growth. And I'm sure, you know, for anyone who is a parent, you'll kind of know that experience of like, it's challenging and awful and stressful and amazing and joyful and all of those things. And, you know, you probably wouldn't change it for anything. And entrepreneurialism, I think, is a bit like that.
Yeah, I love that. I'm not a parent yet, and my time at RX, I came in a little bit after probably the highest crazy of the crazy times, but definitely experienced my own few years of some wild, wild rides. And I would have to agree from I'm not a founder, but uh, some of that, like you look back and like, wow, we learned a lot in a short amount of time, just by going through some crazy, crazy times. So I love that. Part of that too, actually, now I'm thinking about it, for you, I mean, you had the big corporate experience, but what was it like, you and Ben start this out and then you grow a team. What was it like trying to like scale and grow a team and have a big group of people working under you? I always think it's interesting asking founders, like you create something that's your baby and then you have to like bring people on and be willing to like give up some of the control to let other people help build your dream. What is that, at a high level been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, the entrepreneurial mindset is kind of like typically highly skeptical, it's controlling, it wants to understand everything in excruciating detail, right? Like, you know, people who are entrepreneurs, founders, tend to really want to understand the way things work, have a high degree of skepticism around things. And, you know, so that does make it challenging as you kind of bring on, you know, new people, because yeah, it's you got to trust them. And so I think for us, how we've got around that is, you know, we have an obnoxious hiring process basically. So
Okay.
we're only getting in, if you get into this business, then we have a at least reasonable degree of trust in you, you know.
Love
So
it.
we don't hire just for, I mean, I feel bad for people going through our interview process. I feel bad for, you know, some people that haven't made it into our company, because, you know, it's highly kind of imperfect process, and we put people through excruciating amount of interviews, and then we might not hire them because we're not sure. And you know, but it's, so as I say, it's an imperfect thing, but it has led to, you know, a strong culture and a team that we can kind of believe in. And yeah, that's definitely helped. And then, you know, you do need help with your structures as well. Like for me, it's benefited me being part of a large organization in the past and seeing, you know, organizational structure at some scale. You know, if you're a founder that hasn't, then, you know, you definitely need help with that, because it's hard and it's complicated. So yeah, as you get more success and resource, it's where you can start to put people around you, you know, advisors and things that can, you know, guide you on some of this stuff. And, you know, that's a big part of it, just kind of listening and absorbing information, and then, you know, translating that through your own lens.
Yeah, got it. Got it. Love it. It seems like a fun adventure. I can only imagine, tough hiring practices, though, sometimes create, in my opinion, the best cultures I've ever been a part of. You had to make it through some intense hiring. So I get that. For Olipop specifically, like you guys are trying to make, obviously this better for you soda brand. What is, if you want to share, you don't have, if you can't share anything, that's totally fine too. But from like an innovation standpoint, what can consumers maybe expect? Are there any other categories you guys want to crack into? Is it different flavors? What are you guys trying to, over the next 1 to 3 years really attack next?
Definitely new flavors. Yeah, I think the innovation is really hard. And so if you are trying to go across categories as a small business, like I remember trying to do it at Diageo with the resource that we had, and kind of push brands into different segments. It's hard. I think often people overestimate the equity that they have in their brand. Nike has a bit of equity. A handful of other brands do, but there's not that many. So
Sure.
even if you're like a 250 million revenue brand, which feels massive in our startup space, you probably don't have that much brand equity at that point. So you think you can kind of stretch into other categories and people will follow you because they're following your brand. Probably what they're more tied to is product and the specific problem that you have solved for in that category. And so you start layering on organizational complexity and supply chain, and maybe your sales guys now need to go and call on 2 different buyers. So you split their time, and your field sales guys have to go and do different things. Your marketing effort, you're trying to figure out your brand architecture within your brand. Like, how do we promote all of these things? And, you see, even for Coca-Cola, the amount of iterations they've been through with Coke Zero, Diet Coke, and Coca-Cola to try and bring those 3 products under one franchise that they can market efficiently. Like, that's hard. And those products are pretty similar.
Yeah.
There's certain categories, I think, like a brand like Banza has done this really well, that are more commoditized, where you can, sort of go across a bunch of staples. But for us, beverage soda is not a commoditized product. It's something you carry around in your hand. It says something about you. So I think, for us, we were looking for an opportunity that could be north of $1 billion credibly. And, I think within a $40 billion category with 97% household penetration, really, the innovation onus is on us to, make the marketing talk to people in a way that sits on top of soda, and keep refining the flavor profile and get the concept as close to soda as we can, and bring the cogs down so the price point can be at a point that more people can buy into it. So, that's kind of really the focus for us.
Love it. Love it. Great stuff in there. For anyone listening who I guess has been in your shoes, so like someone who maybe works in corporate America or has given something a try, anyone who like has an itch to start something, what advice would you have for them just to get started?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm probably pretty poorly qualified to give advice on it, but because it's such a personal decision as well. It really is. I talk to founders all the time. I try and take a lot of calls because I just surprise myself sometimes. I wake up and like, oh yeah, I've been doing this for like 10 years now. So it still feels like yesterday that I started it. But so you do obviously learn some stuff during that time. And I hear people starting out and talking in a pretty naive way about things, and and you think about kind of discouraging them from doing it, but that was me. So
Yeah, right.
it's like, I'm not sure there's any other way to start, really. So as I say, I would just think about your own. What I would say is this: like, think about, if you're sitting in a corporate chair, startup can look very attractive, particularly if you're kind of a bit burned out in the corporate world. And you're like, I want to go and do this dynamic thing and like be my own boss. And a lot of that is true, but there's downsides to it as well. And so you just got to consider the whole thing holistically and make sure you're okay with the downsides as well as the upsides. Sometimes, I mean, there's some really good corporate jobs out there. My job at Diageo was great. I had 0 complaints about it. And, looking back, I maybe could have solved some of my frustrations by advocating more for the path that I wanted, and sort of molding that thing around the life that I wanted a little bit more. So, there are things to consider, and not all startups are made equal. If you're going to found a business from zero, that's probably the gnarliest thing to take on. You're going to join like a sub $10 million revenue business. That's kind of pretty pretty nail bitey type stuff.
Sure.
If you're north of 50 and Series C financing, it's a different thing. So, again, it's like there's lots of different entry points you can go into it, and you can go, and I'm sure some of the people in our business will go on and do their own thing at some point in their career. But what they're getting now is some insight and learning into, they're learning from Ben and my mistakes, first time around.
Yeah. There you go.
So yeah, there's, but if you feel you need to do it, I would go and do it, and know that, if it doesn't work out, you get a valuable life experience, and just be clear on your boundaries, like know when to stop, and that's not just financial, it's also from a mental health perspective. No, it can really encroach on your family, or, your personal time, or your mental health, or stop you from exercising, and just know where those boundaries are and don't cross them, and just take the consequences either way. It's like, look, I need to, whatever it is, run every day. And so I'm going to do that no matter how much work I've got. And that's just like not a compromise I'm willing to make. And whatever happens, happens. And these are my working hours. And, what it helps you do as well, I think startup at its best is about the intensity with which you work when you are working, not how many hours you work. And
love that. Intensity over volume.
Yeah, mistake I made first time around. I was just getting burned out. So my productivity was going like this. So I was having to work more and more hours to maintain the same level of productivity. This time around, I remember even when, I was starting out, and there'd be days I'd be feeling stressed. I'd just take a bath.
Oh, there you go. Just
lie in the bath and
calm
just
down.
Read the newspaper or something. That would kind of, or you go for a run, and you just bring yourself back down to a level you can think properly again, and then work with intensity.
I
work
love that.
1 hour with intensity rather than 4 hours where you just sat at your computer freaking out, staring at the screen. You will take yourself under if you're doing that.
Great advice. That's phenomenal advice. After your time at Olipop is over, hopefully that's way down the road from now, I'm sure, what would you like to be remembered for?
I think Ben and I really want to, we really want to make a dent in the soda category. We want to give people, an option that kind of moves them away from a high sugar, low fiber diet into a high fiber, low sugar diet, whether that's drinking our product or competitors, or, just switching, educating around the reasons to switch their diet. We also want to show that there's we're intent on doing this in a very specific way with humanity, and and creating an humanistic organization that people can show up for work as their true selves, and be flawed and be imperfect, and that'd be okay, and we work through these things, and and we think with authenticity about what product we're putting out in the world, and the decisions that we make, and how we support each other as a group, and set an example, so that hopefully one day, if we are super successful and whatever held up in some way, when people peel back the hood, what they see is something that we would all want to be replicated in other businesses. And it's hard, because there are a lot of businesses that take shortcuts, and it can lead to success that way. But we're kind of committed to a different path, and it's been fun to kind of push down it.
Love that, and can't wait to see what you guys do next. David, thank you so much for the time today. Last thing, how can people follow you, and how, just as important, how can people try Olipop and follow the brand?
So we're at drinkolipop.com. You can find us there. We have a store located there as well, if you want to find a store near to you. We are most active on Instagram. You can also, if you're listening and want to follow our kind of business journey, we post a lot on LinkedIn as a company, as individuals. Follow various people on our team on LinkedIn, and we try and put useful information out for the community there as well.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. I will add all those links to the show notes so everyone can find it. And David, again, thank you so much for the time. It was great to get to meet you and learn more about Olipop.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Frank.
Appreciate it. Have a good one.